So you think that remembering is not what's needed to be able to learn things? Well, you better think it over. I mean, nobody really ever learns to remember better, but they use their rememberability to learn things like a foreign language, or make a speech, or type at a fast speed, or train your hands on a musical instrument. That's just the way it goes. The only way to actually be able to do all that, which is usually pretty complicated at work, you have to have it in your genetics to remember at a 90% level, or you have to have a neurophysical replacement to help that happen. And that's what you see here in the screen green piece of the pie chart here, 90%. That's about how much you gotta be able to do. You would never be able to do these things with any less than 90% as much. Now, if you think about it right here, rememberability plays a big role in learning, and so therefore, that's what helps you pass tests. And then being able to do more things yourself. I mean, all those neurophysical issues, well, at least 2/3 of them, they actually help you to learn things. They're not the learnable kind, because that would be perpetual knowledge development, which is non-existent. It doesn't work. If you take a look at these different magnets, you can see for a fact as to how learning really works. I mean, usually those who are legally autistic would be like 30% or less. And it's pretty easy to tell. All these brown magnets are the north magnets, and for every hole there is, that means that's how much weaker it is, and there's less sufficiency in it too. For all these green magnets, these are the green south ones that they'd be able to attract. If a magnet is strong, it eventually holds together, and then you can grow up and succeed in college just like usual. Whereas if you have weaker magnets, the magnet's not going to hold up as good. It's going to be pretty hard for it to stick where it's at. You see what I mean? And that's when we have trouble. It really doesn't do any good to try and create schooling for people who have developmental delays, because that's just makes it a place for them to go. They don't really actually get to learn much because their abilities aren't sufficient enough, and it costs too much money to try and create schooling for that level. So I think it would be best if we fixed everybody's level so they can succeed. That's one of the reasons why we don't have a very good economy and why we went into that recession in the first place. This is one thing that pretty much proves that we are not eligible and we can't even be trusted for a debt ceiling raise. We have to fix people's learning abilities and earn that trust first. Now, if a teacher thinks they have a right to practice remembering in the class just because it's less able than usual, nobody gets any better in being able to remember and soon loses what they have been able to remember. The teacher ends up looking totally foolish for making it look as though the student's understanding is lower just because of lacking ability to remember. The student ends up with a bigger need for a year-long resolution plan to heal out all of that in false shame. A student often gets feisty with a spectative teacher to see if they can get out of what's happening to them. Police and the court of law end up getting involved over the student threatening the spectating teacher. School programs lose their revenue to all of their business over having to pay the liability fines in order to keep their jobs. That leads to a lot of shame down at the bottom. Final result. Now, if our school system in the United States takes the time to see that an ability to remember must be repaired by the neurophysicists, well, more students get better at being able to remember and soon earn what they need to be able to remember. The teacher looks smart for helping students know that being able to remember does not affect your ability to understand except in cases of lying. The student ends up having no need for a year-long resolution plan for healing the bulk of all shame. A student remains under control since the teacher isn't nearly as spectative. Police and the court of law won't have to get involved with the teacher and student nearly as much of the teacher spectating them. School programs will get to keep their revenue without having to pay liability fines time and time again. Then everybody gets a medal in the end. But there's something you need to understand. It is never okay at any time to make a student practice remembering a speech and expecting that they'll be able to do so just because they're poor at it. And you cannot and will not accuse them of something they didn't do if you didn't tell them and expect that they'll be able to do things. That is wrong. That's one thing that will not be tolerated. And keeping them after class just because they didn't do an assignment and try to hold them to it until over any situation will be reported to the police immediately. And so the deal is, if you find that the student's not able to remember, you need to tell the neurophysicist to have that fixed. That's what you do. You don't try to handle it yourself. If the student's workplace finds that they're missing and they have to go search the place to pry them out, there's going to be some serious punishment for that too. It's one thing that is not tolerated in the least. And so therefore, if you think that you have a right to nag them just because they can't do things, you are wrong. There's just some things you can't have in the world, and you just have to accept that. I know it's hard, but it's even harder if we don't do things right in the first place. You see what I mean?